Hello everyone and welcome to the Deepbluerenegade podcast. My name is Molly, also known as the Deepbluerenegade, and I'd like to welcome you guys to episode 123. Today is Sunday, February 21st, and I'm glad you could join me today. The coffee is hot and I am in a slightly different location. I figured that having a little bit of like a stash background would be prettier to look at, and it looks like the lighting is decent where I'm at right now. It's been such a gloomy, like, the weather is fantastic, it's just really gloomy out, so I figured there wasn't much natural light to be had today. So, as such, I'm trying out a new recording location, and hopefully the eye candy is good. Maybe I'll shimmy some of the things on my shelf so they're in view. So let's see what's new. I ended up entirely ripping out my Everdeen sock, and this is how far I've gone since I entirely ripped it out. So I just concluded the yarn and pattern weren't playing together really nicely, and that it was going to be better to start anew. So I'm actually doing the simple skip socks with a little skip rib, and you can actually see the little skip rib, so that's pretty cool. And I think I must have done this actually last week, because I'm actually into the pattern now. I don't think I was into the pattern last week. So I've made way more progress in the last week than I had in the previous several months. Well, probably wasn't several, but I think I started these towards the beginning of the year, and now I think I'm finally satisfied with the sort of sock I'm making and how everything is pooling and looking and that sort of thing. Because on one hand, it is, what is it? It is shades of green with a little bit of dark blue thrown in. So it is highly semi-solid as opposed to being solid. But it was just eating the cable and lace pattern, so I figured that this guy was going to work a lot better, and it has. So I was going to do a variation on the skip rib, and then just decided to copy it exactly and not worry about it. So I have a 72 stitch sock on 00 needles. One point of frustration is that it seems like the metal tips on more of my Knitter's Pride carbons are coming off, which is making it a little bit hard to knit. So this one, for example, appears to be a little loose. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have to go back through and fix all of them or what. I just think it's cool to have knitting needles made out of carbon fiber. Maybe it would make more sense to go with the original brand of carbon fiber knitting needles, like the Blackthorns, instead of the Knitter's Pride. And someone else had mentioned that their needles were not necessarily staying on, which is a real problem when you're knitting at such a tight gauge, because the stitches are getting in between the shaft and the tip, and so, but I'm committed to finishing the socks with the needles. Whether or not I need to glue on the rest of the tips, but sort of, I think if I buy another set of carbon fiber knitting needles, it'll be the more expensive brand rather than this, because they're the Blackthorns are solid carbon fiber, so this would be the case where they wouldn't have this failure mode. So that was the story there. So I don't remember the name of who actually wrote the simple skip rib socks. At this point, pattern was memorized and it's going along nicely. Still, I might actually be at the point now where I'm no longer recovering from my ripping back, which is nice. Or it was fairly recently, so further along than I have been in quite some time. The other project which looks to be in the middle of a row. I should fix that. Is the Mulled Cider, which is a Thea Coleman pattern. Oh, don't you fall off. So, aka baby cocktails. Alright, back on the needles. And I suppose I could actually get this into a state where I could show you guys. So, I ended up having an unfortunate discovery at knit night on Friday, which is that I may have taken the right side and put the armhole decreases in the wrong place. So I might be off by about 2 inches, which is quite a few off from how long it was supposed to be. So I'll have to verify, but it was looking like the back was actually 2 inches longer than the front, in which case I didn't have 2 more inches to make on the left front. I had more like 4 more inches to make on the left front, which is the difference. A sizable difference indeed. So what this probably is going to mean is I'm not going to rip out the back, but I probably will be ripping out the right front to the armhole decreases, and then knitting that extra 2 inches, and then doing the armhole, and then putting the armhole in, which will probably mean throwing in some more skeins of yarn, but such is life. But that was sort of irritating, because right when you thought that you had the right amount of yarn for the project, you just, well, it isn't even the amount of yarn, it's that I was pretty sure that I had made the front the correct length, and I had been comparing against the back to make sure that everything was correct. And probably, what is it, a few weeks ago I was talking about whatever, being able to cruise again on the right front, because it was, whatever, I wasn't waiting until the right time to begin something. So it measured the right length, but there can be an awful lot of measurement shenanigans, as one does. So I did 2 rounds of the little diagonal leaf pattern here, and I still have a couple more inches to go before it matches up with the back. So it probably would, oops, it would be on this side. So it would be the case where it would go to mid-thigh there, and then probably somewhere along here for this piece. So I was definitely a little bit frustrated about finding that out, which mostly just meant that I just needed to keep knitting this front, because it wasn't that it was 2 inches off, it was that it was 4. And whatever, I'll probably just immediately go back and fix the right front on this guy, and mostly it's just a measuring fail on my part, not necessarily a fault of the pattern. So annoying, but such is life. So it hasn't gotten a lot of love, as you can tell. I ended up giving more love to the socks this week, and actually I'll be showing a little bit later what has really been consuming my knitting time. Well, what is it? I probably don't have as much to show today anyways, because I ended up taking a nice long afternoon nap yesterday instead of knitting. Yeah. Such is life. So there will need to be some problem solving on this guy, just because it is not the length I thought it would be. Trying to think of if there's anything else I wanted to talk about on this guy. So, on this front, I'm done with the interesting pattern. It's now a decent amount of boring until the finish. It appears that my leaves are lining up perfectly back to front, so if you've seen pictures of this on Instagram, I've been occasionally putting up whatever updates of this. What is it? I think I've incorporated one new skein in at this point, so I finally recovered from my previous loss on this one, which is I ended up knitting up to about this point and then finding out that I hadn't put in any of the waist decreases. Oh man, it's been a comedy of errors. So I ended up ripping back to where I'd started the first leaf motif and then putting a decrease in there, which may not exactly line up, but based on the rate of decreases and that sort of thing, I think it'll be okay. So you're supposed to have like however many decreases along the length, and they're far enough apart that I'm sure it's going to be a small change. Because I'm not the sort of knitter who ends up writing down the number of rows I've done before doing something else, so that's just not my way. So it is coming along, but I will need to more carefully measure what's going on and probably take out the back and use that as my standard as opposed to the front. But I think it ended up being really clear when I was laying it out that it was just not gonna go. So it was something where so we have the back upside down. And then the right front, like so. And then if you end up tracing out where these go, well, they seem to match here. So, I don't know. Or maybe it depends on how you orient everything. But in this case, everything's lining up, but maybe that's because the back is heavier. And when I had it lined up here, well, that looks to be closer to a ½ inch off and that sort of thing, so I do not know. But, so maybe I'll check and make sure, or I'll be using the back as my measuring stick. So whatever. So this is the length of the sweater with those pieces. If I end up taking this out, put this in, go along like so, and then let that fall off. So this is the other piece, and I have about this much more to go before I would put in the other side, and this much more to go before I would be done. So, but I was impressed with how nicely everything was lining up, so I still have a couple more inches to go here, and I might not be as off on the front as I thought. Oh well, that's what demonstrating's for. And in terms of the yarn count, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left out of 17, so I've used 9 so far, which is still not at that 1/3 point. So, because that 1/3 point would be a little bit less than 6, I believe. So I might be getting close. Well, I do have pretty much a full guy here, so I just threw that one in. I shouldn't have too much left of one of them, so it looks like I'm still targeting the right size, or that I have enough yarn for the size I'm making. So this is mindless until I need to measure it again, and it's still several more rows away from me really needing to measure. So on the spinning front, most of my time has actually been spent plying this week. I ended up finishing the singles, which weren't finished last week, and I am now winding on. So I am in the process of actually doing this on my Nitty Naughty right now. So this is the Alicia Goes Around in the, what I'm calling the Mallard colorway, and it's 65% merino and 35% silk, and it is, what did it be? So I ended up spinning it as a gradient, so I took the fiber, split it in half. Sorry, it was winding up real funny. So I took the fiber, split it in half at the middle, and then spun it from the center out. So this meant that the colors lined up pretty well implying at the beginning, and they became more different as I went through. And I ended up having, so I had like 2 basically 4-ounce balls that I was plying from, and I made center pull balls so that I could get as much yardage as possible out of it. And then what I did when I ran out of the first ball, because they were somewhat different weights, so I had about 1/2 ounce left of the first ball, which was a little bit too much, and then I ended up just plying it on itself. So what that made was a section of like blues and darker greens and that sort of thing. So it ended up fitting fairly well in the context of the gradient. And it was the case where I ended up having, I didn't have an awful lot of sections where the blue was on top of the blue implying, which was a little bit of a bummer, but not the end of the world. I think one of the balls had way more blue in it, so I think that would have been the case no matter what. And I'm not counting right now because I lost count rather early on. So I think I'd gone through the first the first 1/2 ounce, and it was at least 100 yards there. So if we go off of that math, that means I probably have 1,600 if I was consistent in weight, which will be a real pain to count. So what I'm going to do is, what I'm doing now is scanning it on, and then I'll count the number of strands, and that will be how much I have, which is effectively what I'm doing normally when I skein. It's just that apparently counting was a little bit too hard this afternoon, but I finally finished applying it this afternoon. Because it was like 5 solid days of sitting at my wheel and applying. So that's why I'm thinking that it is actually going to be pretty ridiculous on the yardage front. And then it might actually be a true lace weight, which I think was what I was trying to target, was to have whatever the right number of yards for my size for the hit a few day. And if it is wrong, then I will be having a massive gradient shawl. Of some sort. But the hit a few day I think would make the best use of the gradient, so that's why I'm hoping that it ends up working out. And I I'm not sure if I'm to the halfway point yet or not, probably not, with getting this onto my niddy-noddy. So I won't be able to report back on the yardage totals or the weight or whatever else, but it is, what is it? I don't even think the camera is doing it any justice at all. So it has the bright teals and the purples, but what it's looking like on the camera right now just seems totally wrong. So let's see if we can take it out a little bit by giving it some weight. So if we have the white in there, does it end up picking up any better, or is it all wrong still? I don't know. I try. So hopefully I have enough yardage for the hit a few day. That was my intent when I started to spin it. And it's certainly, so 2-ply, tried to make the colors line up, and for the most part they did. The yarn itself probably wasn't dyed in a way that would make the colors perfectly line up, but it's sort of fun to have a little bit of a gradient from one color to the next. And then I'll have to figure out what order I want to, or what side I want to make sure to knit from. It might be that the lightest part of the skein is actually right in the middle, so we'll see. There are definitely some very light sections more towards the beginning than to the end. The end appears to have a lot more saturated color in it, so I'd probably start from the lighter end with my knitting. And the nice thing about the hit a few days, you never need to break the yarn, so it's the perfect pattern for the gradients like this. Otherwise, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the fact that I spun a yarn for a gradient, and then it'll be a sweater meant for a gradient. And I must be getting close to the halfway point for scanning, but I'm not going to be able to finish scanning on the podcast, I'm assuming. And what I'll end up doing is then going through and counting the strands after I get it off the niddy-noddy, which isn't preferred, but I think that's going to be the only way to make this go. And so now that this is coming off the wheel, I'll have to get started with that which is going on. And I haven't entirely decided yet, unfortunately. I'm sure I will decide rather quickly once this is off. So we'll put that aside for the time being. So if you wanted to see what's still left on the wheel, so you can see this part is less saturated, and this part is also less saturated here, but we're starting to see the teal again. At some point I'll uncover the blue, and it's very pretty, so I'm looking forward to getting my chance to knit with it. So I did have a couple of things waiting in the wings. So what I have here are several packages of silk hankies. It ends up adding up to 3 ounces. And the thought process would be to spin them together in such a way where things would blend together to make something cool. Where I ended up getting, this group really goes together well, and then this group really goes together well. And there's a little bit of everything there, so I don't know if this would be my color sequence or if it would be something else, but so this is a prize I got from Twitter Fleece, so it's Friends and Fiber, and it is silk hankies on the water, in a variety of colorways. I'm not sure once I settle on something, then that'll be fine. The other thing that's waiting, which is hanging over here, is my 2 braids of Three Waters Farm. And I think this would be what would be next on the wheel, and I have an option of spinning the BFL in color music. And you can still actually buy this, because this is part of the Completely Twisted and Arbitrary spin along. And so then this is magentas and teals and purples and a little bit of orange. And it might be worth doing a, Navajo ply stocking with this. And then the other one is actually the Merino and Tussa Silk, and this is the Mirror Lake colorway. And it is sort of golds and greens and light blues and magenta and a little bit of like a purplish. I'm wondering if I want to actually make singles out of this, because it is Merino Tussa. And I think I would actually be able to make singles with this. And that would be like a new skill, so that could go with the craft all the things, and I'm just undecided. And honestly, spinning the silk hankies would also count for the craft all the things, but I'm not sure I could finish those on a spindle in time for the 31st. I don't know. It is the 21st, so maybe it is possible. But spinning silk hankies would be a new skill too, so we'll put those back in the stash. So there are options for what the next thing will be. And honestly, it could just be that I start both and see what happens. The silk hankies are going to be way more portable, so those will probably be hanging out in my little spinning bag. And since I still seem to be far from finishing any knitting projects, there won't be anything new going on the needles. So I'm knitting with my hand spun, so that's promising. So, because there is a pretty decent amount of hand spun in the stash, and I'm, as of late, been making it faster than I've been able to knit it, so so there's some of it like hanging up here, and I really need to get around to putting it away. I ended up doing a pretty big cleanup in the room so that I could actually record from here, and I'm probably going to end up doing things a little bit differently now. So I did just have the blocking mats out on the floor all the time, and I've decided that it's probably actually a better way to go to take them apart and put them back together again as needed, so because it just makes it so much easier to keep the room clean and vacuum and that sort of thing if they're not out on the floor all the time. And I probably have all sorts of, I'm just looking at my little table, all sorts of random accoutrements that probably need to have long-term homes instead of the short-term home, which is covering that poor little table. So I'll have to puzzle over that and decide what I want to do. But in the CTA boards, they were talking about craft room cleanup and that sort of thing. So it's been a nice inspiration to actually get around with putting things where they belong and making sure everything's organized and everything has a place and that sort of thing. So I've been working along that sort of dealio. I'm trying to think if there is anything else I want to mention aside from, what is it? No, there's nothing else I want to talk about. I should be able to record next week, which will be the 28th, which is not the last day in February because it's leap year. Yay! And I'm trying to think if there's, yeah, no, there really isn't anything else. Oh, silliness. So, with that, I hope you guys have a lovely week, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week. So, take care, guys. Bye-bye.